Alright, here is the display stand. This is the stock CR66 display stand. I don't know if a lot of the details will show up with the flat black paint, but this is the base coat that I'm going to be using for the model. This is an absolutely beautiful stand that Jim did. So you got all of the ornate kind of Victorian scroll work going on there. It's plenty strong to hold the model, and I'll secure it additionally with some reinforcement on the display base, and that's going to be made out of a piece of oak that I'll be cutting, routing, and urethaning, so you have a nice finish on it. As I mentioned, it'll be on this corner here. I'll be routing the control cables through the inside of the display stand and into the base. So flat black finish. Reason I did that is to get a little bit of differentiation between the model and the display stand, but I'll be using the same rusting technique on the display stand as I will on the model, and the flat black actually gives a nice base for that as well. So it's actually what I'm going to be moving on to here right now, and show you guys how it's done. Alright, I wanted to take a second to talk really quickly about the rusting technique that I use, and I went into this in another one of my videos, and that's painting the Disney Nautilus. It's also on my channel. You can feel free to take a look at that. But in a nutshell, what you're going to need is this Metal Effects iron paint from Modern Masters. They sell it in this 6 fluid ounce size, which is great for, you know, models and hobbies. I use vinegar rather than their activation solution. Obviously a lot cheaper, and it works just as well. You'll need a fairly large soft bristled paintbrush, and then a container. And what I'm going to basically do, I'm going to add the rusting solution to my container. I'm going to mix in the vinegar, which is going to activate the rust and create the rust solution. And I'm going to mix that at a ratio of about 50-50, so a 1-to-1 ratio, and you can adjust that depending on how rusty you actually want things. If you just want, you know, a little bit of rust to gather in the creases and such, use more vinegar. You can also use water as well as a cutting solution, but you need, you know, the vinegar or the activation solution to actually create the rusting process. So 50-50 is what I'm going to use. And I'll show you the application here in a second. Alright, here we go. You can see I got my rusting solution all mixed up, and the real key to seeing if you've got the right ratio is just going to spread it on the side and make sure that it sticks, that you can actually see the you know, the black rusting solution on there. If it's too thin, it'll just flow right down, and if it's too thick, it'll just look like a paste. So I think I got my ratios pretty good here. So basically, unfortunately, all you do to apply this is just slather it on like crazy, let it flow, let it settle, let it do its rusty thing. Just make sure that you do get it in all of the nooks and crannies that you're trying to. So I'm going to basically apply this everywhere on this display stand, and I'm going to let gravity do its thing and let all of the rust flow into the crevices and the creases of the display stand. And I'll show you guys what the outcome is here in probably an hour, and you'll see the solution starting to do its thing. Alright, as you saw, I got all the wiring and everything in place, all tidied up and nice and clean. I've thrown the top of the hull back on there. It's just sitting there right now. It's not secured down. But really what I wanted to do before I did that is double check my windows in the wheelhouse to make sure that no grungies or dust or anything ended up on the insides of the windows. And as you can see, it actually is very clean. I can't see any impurities in there that will degrade the looks of the model once it's all set up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remask those wheelhouse windows. I'm going to mask off the salon opening there, and basically going to secure things down with the screws here, one in the front, get the hull all nice and tight, and then basically it will be buttoned up and I can move on to the paint finish of the model itself. Pretty exciting stuff. Alright, I'm going to go into a little bit of Rivet Repair 101. As I mentioned earlier, I had to sand flush the blister here so that my bezel, the facing here, fits perfectly flush on the outside. Certainly not a big deal, except that I sanded off all of the rivets that go around the outside on the upper edge here. So we need to do some rivet repair. And just like the original model, they're actually created with glue. In this case, I'm going to use a product called JB Weld. It's fairly well known. Mixed up a batch here. This is going to cure over the course of an hour or two, which gives you actually a lot of time to work. What I found is the JB Quick is just a little bit too quick in that it starts to set up after about 5 minutes, and that's not really enough time to get done. So the trick is to use a toothpick, get a little bit of the epoxy on the tip, just touch it to your model, pull back carefully so the little string doesn't make a tail, and what will happen is that'll settle and it'll make a perfect little rivet. So it's time consuming, sort of the bane of every Nautilus modeler's existence, but works out really, really well. So I'm going to make all my rivets around the outside there, and I'll show you the final product in a few minutes. Alright, here we go. This is the finished reworked product. You can see all of the rivets that I've recreated around the perimeter of that salon bezel there. Probably hard to see on the camera, but this took me about 7 or 8 minutes to get in there. Of course, probably got a little bit more practice than some other people building and fixing these models, but it does go fairly quickly, and the finished product actually works quite good once you get the hang of it. So next step is going to be getting the model all primed up and getting ready for paint. Okay, quick update on the display stand. You can see that the rust has dried, and we got all sorts of neat colors going on, from the dark red to the bright orange. What I'm actually going to do now is I'm going to hit it with a dusting of high gloss enamel, and that's going to tone down some of the colors and make everything just a little bit more rich and downplay the rust just a little bit. Alright, here is the completed display stand. You can see I've got a clear coat lacquer on there that's kind of dulled down some of the colors, and again, I kind of wanted that. I want this to be a little bit more subtle, let the Nautilus take center stage. And over here we have the model itself. You can see that I have base coated the entire model with metallic silver, and I've highlighted all of the panel lines and rivets with grimy black by Flowquill, and use the airbrush for that. And kind of the neat thing about this is everywhere that I have airbrushed, the rust is going to want to stick to that just a little bit more. So that's kind of the idea behind that. It'll also give me a lot more variations in shading and such for the model. So next step is the actual rusting of the model. I'm going to mix up the same sort of batch that I did for the display stand, and we'll see what we can make this thing look like. Okay, here is the finished product after the application of the rusting solution. Everything is very wet, as you can still see, although the reaction has already started to take place. You can see the rust colors starting to come through. They're going to brighten up as they dry, and actually I wish that there was a way to lock it in right now, because I really do love this kind of wet, glistening, rusty look, but unfortunately what you need to do is let it dry, brush it down, and then hit it with some clear to get that look back again. But the advantage is you get to remove some of the rust from the exposed panels and leave it in the riveted areas. It turns out really good. But this is where we're at as of right now. I'm going to let this thing dry overnight, and then tomorrow morning, bright and early, get back at it, wipe it all down, and put a little bit of clear coat on there. And then the hull will be about 90% complete. It'll just be a little bit more weathering, some touching up with some pastels, and then we're going to move on to the creation of the display base and making the control box. Alright, we got some significant progress here. The rust all dried up, and I used a damp rag to wipe the hull down, kind of top to bottom. You can see I got some like nice streaky rust marks on there. And then I went over the whole thing with some gloss lacquer. I've peeled off the masks for the wheelhouse. You can see it's starting to look like a real boat, and I really like the sort of the wet sheen that's the gloss leaves. But you can see that actually in the rusty areas, the rust absorbs the lacquer and it leaves a matte finish. So you get some really neat effects of gloss and matte and semi-gloss, just for some, you know, visual interest on here. You can see I've got an LED light for the skiff berth. There was one scene in the movie that kind of showed it. It's a little bit of a topic for debate on the forums, but I like it. It adds a lot of visual interest. What I actually want to do is I'm going to show you the basils here, and you can see that I've pre-rusted these to match the finish. I've got 2 of the floodlights installed here. Well, actually 3. I've got 1 there as well. And these are Google Eyes from Hobby Store. Takes a little bit of practice to get these cut, but basically, if I can move this so you can see, you just take a very sharp hobby knife, put it in on the edge, and just run it around the edge. Sharper the knife, the easier and safer this is going to be. So you can see that just took a few seconds, and these are perfectly fit, so they just press fit into the basil there. And then what I'll do afterwards, I'll use some thin CA, just a drop, just to keep it in place there. So that's how I'll be doing that. And then afterwards, I'm going to hit the back side with some flat lacquer, probably 2 or 3 coats, so that you get a frosted look to the lenses, and it really disperses the light from the LEDs. Alright, it is Canadian Boxing Day, the day after Christmas. Had some great progress on the model. As you can see, it looks like it is getting close to the final stages, and that's certainly true. The base and control is really the only thing left to do. You can see all the final weathering has been done. I've used some grimy white to put a little bit of smearing on the deck. I've used some pastels to weather the scuppers. The display base has been semi-permanently mounted at this point. I have also scratch built some hold down wheels for the skiff, and the skiff is actually fully removable. It's just sitting in place. You just slide it straight back and you can remove it to take a look at things. And this is the skiff interior with the oars. This is a Michael Suave product, which is absolutely gorgeous. And here you can see the 3 control wires that control all of the features of the model. So next step is the display base. We're going to get that all done up and look for that in the next blog. Thanks for watching.